Experience Africa's heartbeat.
The African Pulse.
A weekly broadcast that takes you across Africa.
Different topics.
Culture.
Tech. Health.
Economy.
And even politics.
The African Pulse.
Only on Ifrikya FM.
Hello, Jumbo Africa, in the first episode of 2026 of the African Pulse. As we move from event to influence, examine how Africa interacted with the world in 2025 and, more importantly, on whose turn. Power is shifting globally, but not evenly. In 2025, Africa found itself courted, contested, and sometimes even spoken for. And today, we explore power dynamics, foreign influence versus African agency, and how Africa is portrayed in global media narratives. Once again, I am joined by Divirnana Kwamina to my right. Hello.
Hello everyone. Happy New Year.
Hello, Idad.
Hello, Iman. Happy New Year to you, to everyone, to Nana, to all our listeners across Africa. I hope everyone is willing to have resolutions for this new year or whatever.
Resolutions?
Yeah.
Let's talk about a change, a good positive change. Thank you. This
Hopefully.
was Idad Alawa, by the way. Okay, so, these guys whose insights help us cut through rhetoric and get closer to reality will help us unfold today's episode. And starting right with our first segment of the day, Power Shift and Foreign Influence, a new balance. From the emerging powers to traditional partners, Africa remains central to global competition. But competition does not always mean empowerment. In 2025, did Africa gain more leverage in its relationship with, let's say, global powers, or did all dependency patterns simply take new forms?
Well, I think 2025 was a strange year, Power, we had major power shifts within the West African side of Africa. There's strife going on within the Central, and the South are going through their own things. It's not easy, but I would say, yeah, we did. But it was situational. 2025, the power shift was situational. It was not a wholesale power shift. When we talk about leverage, what does leverage mean? Leverage is the ability to influence outcomes because others need you. So,
yes.
In conclusion, well, not in conclusion, but to go on, I want to say that Africa's leverage in 2025 did not come from military power. Neither did it come from financial dominance. Neither did it come from a unified continental foreign policy, which is in play, but that was not how our 2025 concluded. But yes, we had multipolar competition that intensified last year. You had major players, the US, China, even the EU, Russia, India, Turkey, of all people, having interest, of all countries having interest within Africa. And what were they competing for? They're competing for access. They're competing for alignments in foreign policies. And they were competing for narrative legitimacy. There's a war going on beyond the continents of Africa, in Europe, Russia, Ukraine, and within, and
the
to
Middle
our
East.
brothers in Palestine. Our hearts. It's a new year, but we do not forget you, people. We do not forget.
Yes,
the
we do not forget our
citizens
brothers
of-
and sisters
yes,
suffering
we do
across
not.
the world.
Yeah, so
especially the Palestinians.
yeah, so that's where the narrative legitimacy comes in. More supports in your corner and not. But then, for what we're talking about, critical materials, energy transition. France is a nuclear power, but clearly they've been cut off from their supply, so that comes into play. And then we have to understand what Africa holds that is essential for the world stage. We have cobalt, which is you find in abundance in the DRC for most of your electronics. You have lithium. In Zimbabwe, Namibia, there's also been deposits found in Ghana. Then there's magnesium, and then there's gas. You know, Algeria has been stable on that end. You have Mozambique. Well, you know what's going on there. For those who don't know, Mozambique has been going through a lot for the past few years, and it's been there's been insurgency, but most of the theory is it's over gas. It's over the large natural gas deposit that they found.
And that brings us back to what we discussed the previous week about Africa holding our resources, but there is always something holding us back from taking the full exploitation of these resources ourselves.
Yes.
Because we do have the first material, but then again, we do not know the... or we are not putting this material into its real value.
Yeah, but that conversation became highlight. You know, you're right. That conversation became highlighted in 2025. You know, African states, the demand has been going on for years. Let's not start the conversation right now and say that something shifted in 2025. The conversation has always been to add value to our primary product, which is our resources. So the conversation through 2025 was the same. You know, demand for local processing, push for value addition, and renegotiation on concession terms. And, you know, not all countries succeeded, but the possibility of leverage did expand. For your first question. And then now we're looking at diplomatic visibility, and that reached new heights. G20 went on in South Africa last year.
Yeah, and talking about the G20, how do forums like the G20 or let's say energy summits, for example, the NAPEC, reflect or fail to reflect African priorities rather than external interests?
Well, I mean, they do partially reflect African priorities, but I do believe that they are still structurally biased towards our interests. So it's they are biased towards external, not African interests. I wanted to rephrase that. So we are not a priority because the G20 has informally always excluded Africa as a whole. So, but what does it mean to reflect the African priority? You know, you at least need three things. For us to start to set agendas and just not respond to them. I don't mean local agendas or within the G20 itself. Set the agenda the other countries follow through with, right? And we need to look at enforceable mechanisms like our finances, right? Our finances need to speak on themselves. Our rules need to be respected, and our timelines as well. When we demand something, we expect the world to follow through. We are no longer taking a backseat. And then the African problem should be a world problem. They should not be reframed through external lenses. You know, I think the last conversation we had so far is about how the world views Africa. When we put a problem on the docket, it's by our definition what the problem is, not through other countries. I would like to say.
I would agree with you on that it is no longer an agenda item, but an agenda setter.
Yes. We need to set the agenda.
As discussed in the G20, development finance reform, climate justice, it really gained visibility globally. And even foreign partners have begun to see the opportunity that Africa provides to invest here, to form infrastructures and associations in different fields.
Indeed, and we can see Africa attracting several global investors. Yes, we see India. We see
India, for example.
Yeah, we see China. We see Russia. We see Turkey, as Nana mentioned previously, and all of these now are trying to shift their investment into Africa because now the world knows that the future is in Africa. There is a certain shift that the global stage did notice in Africa, because it's not just a passive player in the field as it used to be. Now Africa is indeed pushing itself forward and taking action.
Especially, I would say, in sectors like energy and mining. And as we know, we all have one of the most important natural sources in the world.
Indeed.
Like gold, for example, in Ghana.
And he mentioned
Sudan
also
as
other
well.
sources. Yes, but it's not just about that. It's even, like I mentioned previously,
Exploitation. It's the exploitation
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
we need to...
We have the resources for nuclear power, but we don't have. I think Algeria has one, but I don't think it's actively used to power a whole city. I think there's always, Algeria has always had alternatives, but the fact that it exists in only a few, while the resource, you've got uranium in Mali, France powers most of its houses with nuclear power. The countries that mine the resource, uranium.
I think uranium was actually discovered in Algeria, in the south, south regions. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
still not fully exploited.
Exactly, it's not fully exploited by the government. And besides these natural sources, there always is the agriculture, and there is an undying field, because we all know that Uganda, for example, is a major player when it comes to the coffee sector, the coffee industry.
Right.
And it's not the only country, actually.
Yeah,
we have in cocoa, for example, there's Ghana.
Ivory Coast. We used to control the market back in the days of Nkrumah, but we don't anymore. And I think we need to push to that more coalition between African countries that produce the same crops. For a bigger leverage in the market.
Indeed. And this is the shift that happened in 2025. African neighboring countries did not know what their neighbor is producing. And there was not much cooperation amongst many African nations, but events held for this, let's say, for the trade reason, with the AfCFTA being called several times to put into, let's say, action, because now the African free trade, the African continental free trade area is now also also has a role in facilitating trade among African nations, and events like the IITF played a certain role in introducing African investors amongst each other, for future
Trade
cooperations. And let's not just talk about the big economies. There also is the soft economy that should be taken into consideration. Now, startups and micro enterprises also
I call this
are pushing the economy.
The new economy.
I mean, one of the big shifts, I think, that I was just reading something online yesterday, and it was about PayPal returning to Nigeria. PayPal left most African countries, especially in the West. They left Ghana and they left Nigeria, principally what I know of, and that was because of fraud, right? But to use a small section of people to brand nations is insane. And within the absence of PayPal, we had the rise of fintechs.
Exactly. Exactly.
And now we hear that PayPal wants to partner with the fintechs in Africa to come back. And people are complaining, we as Africans need to sit down and define what is ours.
Exactly.
Now that
branding.
Now that there's a bigger pie, PayPal wants the pie, because now finance is still moving.
Exactly.
We managed to find ways without PayPal, and now they want to come back. This is the leverage we speak of.
Understandable. This is Africa should actually push its brands and its innovation into more, let's say, growth, instead of yielding to giving a piece of its pie to the bigger players in the field, like PayPal, for example. Africa is innovative when it comes to fintech, actually, and we do have our own policies. For example, in Algeria, when it comes to the fintech apps, they're totally secured. completely secured, too secure that sometimes people start complaining like there are a lot of passwords, nobody can do this and nobody can do that, this is kind of hindrance, but that's not the case. It's actually protecting privacy. This way nobody can take your money or hack into your account or something. And that's the positive thing about fintech in Africa.
It is important to pay attention to technology and innovation because it is the future.
It is the future indeed, but most importantly, we should not neglect talking about when we talk about the innovation, when we talk about the startups, we should never ignore the security of it, because the security is the most important thing about it, privacy and security. This is all we should discuss now for the first segment. We should take a little music break, and then we'll come back to you in the second segment with more to discuss. So enjoy it. Welcome back to the second segment of our podcast today, titled Who Tells Africa's Story and Why It Matters. The narratives always shape policy. And in 2025, Africa was often described as emerging or at risk or, let's say, strategic. But who controls these labels? Who is calling what? How did the international media portray Africa's role in global politics and economics in 2025, and what was missing from that picture? So we have a lot of foreign media that is reporting what's happening in Africa, telling the African story on our behalf. So how do you see this media's reporting compared to our own African media?
Yeah, I think international media largely framed Africa through external utility. We see them using terms like strategic, at risk, emerging. So, yeah, we were talking about that on the last episode. So it is always in relation to someone else's benchmark. So it's always related to foreign powers, to the West or
to the West, yes.
Yeah. And in 2025, African media portrayed Africa as an increasingly assertive political actor. Leaders advocating UN reforms and greater inclusion in global decision making. You can give an example: the G20. As we discussed previously, coverage also moved beyond crisis narratives by highlighting economic growth, resilience, and development efforts, including the role of institutions, financial institutions like the African Development Bank, regional governance, and political stability was reported, often emphasizing the role of regional organizations such as the ECOWAS, etc.
Yeah.
So at the same time, some analytical voices criticized Africa in a negative stereotypes in global media coverage. However, some international media have been reporting African matters with overlooking deeper structural realities. And Africa's role as a strategic global partner contributed to supply chains, to economic infrastructure. So I think resulting in an incomplete picture of the continent's global significance.
There is an imbalance in the way in what actually happens on the ground and what is seen, but that's because I believe most of us are the interviewees or the interviewer. We are not the main actor. We are the context. So basically, when everyone looks at Africa there's already preset narratives that people just go along with. And and where are these narratives produced? They're produced in Western newsrooms. They are produced by external correspondents, non-African think tanks, and these think tanks exist outside Africa. They don't step to look at the structural and the reality on ground. And so we're really authors of our own destiny on paper, basically. And there are incentives that favor these narratives, conflicts, drama, moral agency. They bring views. So why stop the pipeline when you can contribute?
So basically, there is let's say benefits.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they are using Africa for their own benefit to gain more popularity
Exactly.
on the expense of the truth.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you see the international media outlets, it continue to spotlight in Africa the conflicts, the instability, and even the risks when covering Africa's political or even the economic role. And much of the global news coverage emphasize, let's say, on the conflicts, on the election unrest or the tourism hotspots. And we see that like all the time, and even the geopolitical tensions. We can even see that it gives the image of Africa as being the hub of security and stabilization.
Yeah.
Like it's an area that is not stable when it comes to security, and people will try to
trying to
avoid
weaken
it.
the stance of Africa.
But that's not all Africa is about. And if we talk about, let's say, let's not talk about politics. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about, for instance, about the economy. We see that they cover Africa's strategic role, for example, in the global trade as just natural resources. And they would just diminish it into just a natural resource country. Let's say, for example, Kenya is a certain natural resource for a certain thing, and they would just diminish it into that. It's not what just that country is about. It has a lot to offer, and this is not
they contextualize, as he said.
Exactly. But if we talk about African media, on the other hand, we see they frequently they emphasize on the leadership, on priorities, and even the agency, and especially when it comes to economy. And let's not go far and mention other media. Here, our radio station, Ifrikya FM, is one of the media outlets that. What is our motto again, Anna? Remind me.
The voice of Africa.
Exactly. We are trying to give the best image on Africa, and doing that by us Africans, as one hand, and each of us represent their own culture, their own narratives, and they give the best image about their countries, to give the truth about us, instead of relying on foreign media. And I do believe that this is the platforms or the media outlets that us as Africans should promote more, because this is the media that would give you the truth. It will not just show you just the negative side of the story. Let's look at both sides. Every coin has two sides, right?
Yeah.
And Africa also has two sides. Let's not focus on just the negative side of it. Let's see the positive side as well.
That's what's often missed in the foreign media. They don't balance the narratives. They just take the negative one.
Exactly. So now this leads me to ask, African journalists, scholars and even institutions, doing enough to challenge external narratives and assert African perspectives?
They are doing more than before, but if you ask me, it's not enough, and it's not by choice. It's not. I do not sit here and look at our fellow journalists and say you need to do more because you are not doing more. The reality is they are doing more, but in the context of your question, is it enough? it's never enough.
Yeah.
Right? The limitation is not about talent, it's not about the commitment, it's about structure. It's about, we spoke on incentives and power over narrative, right? And yeah, so what matters is that the journalists, the African journalists, they're doing it right, and that's what matters. We're reclaiming the agency in storytelling, right? There's I forgot his name, but there's this one presenter on CNN. He's always on the ground for Africa. I was watching his coverage of what was happening in Tanzania at this moment, right, with the protests and everything, and you know. Across the continent, journalists are increasingly challenging Western frames. We're centering African voices. Like I said, we're no longer just the interviewee. We are also the interviewer. We are talking. We are giving context on the ground. You know, we there's more investigative work. In Ghana, we have a famous journalist. He's always undercover. He's the one that always uncovers political corruption. He's called Anas. Still today, we don't know his identity. He always covers himself, and he just comes on a random
For security reasons, understandable.
So, Ifrikya FM, for example, is an African-led platform, and that's what it needs to be about. You know, Pan-African digital outlets, independent investigative collectives. You know, not just one station, not just one individual, but a group of people that have a common understanding for the truth, right?
And the same Pan-African spirit.
Yeah, and you know, we did when we were at the African Startup Conference. We did meet with the Commissioner of Infrastructure and Energy,
at the
and
AU,
she did offer to get us credentials for the next AU committee, AU summit, and that in itself is important. The fact that she pushed for it is important because we need greater presence at global summits to tell our stories from the African point of view. You're talking about your G20 summits, your African Union meetings, your climate negotiations, your trade forums. You need the African voice. We shouldn't wait for the foreign journalists to tell us our stories. That's why I say
exactly. You mentioned, for example, the CNN. I don't need the CNN to tell me what's happening in Africa.
So, but I do this to say is that, like I said earlier on, it's about the structure.
Yeah,
we need more African voices within these places and positions
on field.
So yeah, and you know. Now controlling narrative crisis. We need government support. You need people. We need, in fact, the citizens. If your support goes a long way for African journalists. They are there and they are working. But the question was, is it enough? It could be if there is a general consensus to allow our journalists be journalists. To allow them access, room, and finance. So for you, the listeners, to continue listening, empower the journalist, and then we could get to a place where we could say it's enough.
Exactly, and there are certain policies that need tweaks. To facilitate the journalists' work in Africa, because as a journalist myself, we do struggle when it comes to certain things, and it's understandable to some extent, but it also is a hindrance for a journalist to work. And that is, for example, let's say being in a foreign country to do certain coverage, but then you'll find certain issues with let's say the bureaucracy for certain papers, and I don't know, maybe some other things. For example, you find the lack of cooperation with the interviewees. You know, you go there to interview certain people, but they would not know your media, so they would not want to talk to you. And other struggles as well. We see that on the field all the time. So, as you mentioned, Nana, yes, the journalists are trying to do their best, but it's still not enough. So here we need a cooperation, or we need to put hand in hand together with the policymakers and with the people to push forward.
And
for
with the participation also of African scholars and African professors, to
And
invite them, to
experts.
go meet them, to interview them, to let them explain, to let them express everything that is going on.
Usually that's the case. We do indeed do that. Our radio station, for example, does that. Interviews with the scholars, with experts. We do bring that.
But like you
the
said, it's never enough.
It's never enough. That's the issue. So what we need here is that we need the listeners to push more for it, because we need them to give value to our work, because we are trying our best to give the best image on Africa. We are trying to give the real voice of Africa here. But if they are not listening, if they are not trying to understand, so what's the use?
I guess this is the challenge.
Yes,
The challenge
so
is not
this
to
is-
tell the story. The challenge is to,
Are they willing to listen?
to keep them here and to keep them listening.
Exactly. And this is also, sometimes it's on the shoulder of the journalist, but not all the time, because now I can say that listeners have the freedom of choice, whether they listen or not. Maybe back in the day they didn't have a choice. They just had let's say one media platform to listen to, but now they have options. There's also social media. So they have options. They did not need to listen. But
That's why we need to have variation.
Exactly. So it's not completely on the journalist, but it's also on the listener. Are they willing to listen to what we are saying?
Exactly, yes.
So they need to have the will. They need to have let's say that's the minimum, actually. They have to need interest in what is unfolding right under their nose in their own continent. They need to know. They need to be surrounded by all of this information. And the question now is no longer whether Africa matters. That is settled. Yeah. The real issue is the agency. And who decides, prioritize, who shapes the narratives, and who ultimately benefits. 2025 offered clues and pushed for resolutions and pushed for, as you said, we did, agenda settings, but the answers are still being written. So that's all I have to say for today. Any last word that you'd like to add, Nana, before we conclude?
The narrative is the narrative. And for you to serve the greater narrative, you have to be African, and you have to love Africa. And just the external noise is not for you. Listen to your neighbor, listen to your local news network, listen to a friend, listen to your professor,
Yes.
listen to your parent.
Yeah, listen to your parents.
Listen to your parents.
Yeah, we should
Very-
emphasize on that.
But yeah,
They know better.
They know better.
yeah, but yeah, we are Ifrikya FM. We are here for you. The narratives, the stories, in this little. Well, I can't say little. Let me know. But we are humble beginnings. But we hope you follow us from here till we get to a place where it's enough. Yeah. So thank you for listening, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Oh, that's sweet.
Thank you.
What about you, Dad?
I just want to say that we should keep moving towards our ultimate goal, which is telling the African story by Africans themselves to the rest of the world. I think that's what this podcast is about, this channel is about. Yeah, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Vidad. Well, indeed, now all we need to do is put hand in hand together to build our own Africa, because it belongs to us. It's our motherland, and even for the diaspora, no matter where you are, this is your motherland. So we need all to put hand in hand together and build this continent, because it well deserves it, and we need to voice its real identity to the global stage. So that's all I have to say. This has been the African Pulse. Thank you, Nana, for being with us. Thank you, Widad. And a big thank you to the editor of this episode, Muad Baba Ahmed. And thank you, dear listeners, for sticking to the very end. This is not just part of the global conversation. Africa is shaping itself. Never forget that. So until next time, Happy New Year.